hang in there. Go back, get caught up at your leisure, as the show will be posted to iTunes and in our own audio vault upon the conclusion. Now, today we do what we do with these, the weird off seasons that we have. When we have seminal headlines, we do have headlines for you today. That begins at 4. It's the Jeff Cameron Show with you from 3 to 4, then headlines. And that means probably in that time some major breaking story will happen, like the hiring of a new offensive coordinator named Kendall Briles and all that entails. We'll get into it momentarily. Online, as I said, ESPNTallahassee.com. You can email the show if you like. Some of you have. JCS at 979ESPNradio.com. You can follow on Twitter at JCameronShow. I know. And that'd be an interesting site. Don't type that in. Also on YouTube, we're back with you today. I find that if we're not on YouTube, people just assume the show's not on. But the show is on. It's just not always on YouTube.
I guess people like to see us.
Or they just check in to make sure, they're on. Oh, there they are. Okay.
It's comforting to know it's happening.
It's
okay,
there.
all right.
Yeah. On YouTube, it's ESPN Tallahassee. Type it in, you'll find it. Jeff Cameron Show, whatever, you'll find it. And on Periscope, it's at 979 ESPN Radio on Twitter. There you go, all caught up. So, the question becomes whether or not Florida State is on the cusp of hiring one Kendall Briles away from Houston. There's a lot of money involved in that, and there will be plenty of controversy involved in that if it happens. What's not in question has been certainly his successes as a coach, his seemingly in-depth knowledge of what it is that Willie Taggart wants to run, and in part because Willie went and visited Baylor while he was at USF to watch how that offense was installed and how that operated on game day, et cetera. So from a football sense, I understand the interest, but there are just so many competing feelings about this because obviously you want to hire a good coach. You lost your offensive coordinator in Walt Bell. There's nothing that you could have done about that. He took a job to be a head coach at UMass, so you have to replace him. So then you go about the process of looking into potential candidates. And, there are a lot of rumors out there about who is or is not a candidate originally, as I discussed on the show yesterday and as we discussed some last week. Hugh Freeze's name came up. How serious a candidate he was to take over as offensive coordinator is up for debate. There are some people who say that it was just a debate about certain obligations and commitments and time and contractual situations that we'll never really know now that he's moved on to become the head coach at Liberty, which is hilarious, by the way. Anyhow, so that happened. I'm not real sure Hugh Freeze was a serious candidate to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. I've got sources on both sides of the fence there who say that he was, others that say was never going to happen, and there really wasn't all that much interest from Willie Taggart. I hope that's true because I sure as hell didn't want his sorry ass, and I didn't want what he brought with him. And I'm not sure I want what Kendall Briles brings with him either. But it doesn't really matter what I want. It matters that the university vet thoroughly Kendall Briles and his time at Baylor and also his time at FAU in Houston. I would think that you would have to go to great lengths and do your due diligence here to protect yourself at all costs before saying yes to a Kendall Briles. Because whether he did know or didn't know and what he knew and when he knew it and what he did about it or didn't do about it, those are all questions to ponder and ask and research and try to find out. True. One thing's for certain, his name's tied to a program that was investigated and involved in one of the largest sexual assault, rape scandals in the history of college football. That ain't good. His dad is Art Briles, who did run that program, and he did work for him and was in a position of authority at that time. And if you are going to have your name associated with that, you better know what he knew, what he didn't know, what he's guilty of, if anything, and what his stance was on all of those things. I mean, you've got to find out. You got to talk to the people at Houston. You got to talk to the people at FAU and find out who he is. What's he about? And you got to do it more so than you would as you vet any other candidate for the job, just because of his association with a very ugly, heinous situation. And, I've seen but not engaged in the great debates there on Twitter amongst the alumni and fan base. And it seems to fall in a couple of camps, but it doesn't need to be. This can be, nuanced, because it is nuanced. You can be an ardent supporter and absolutely love your university and continue to support it, even if they hire Kendall Briles, while still saying outwardly and publicly, I don't agree with this hire. I don't like the light it puts us in. I think it's a mistake to do this. You can say, well, he was vetted by 2 other universities along the way. He was never directly implicated the way his father was, so he's once removed at the very least here. And I'm going to trust that now 3 different universities who went about the process of hiring him would have done their due diligence, and he's a real good football coach, so we're moving forward with the hire. You can say that too. It's possible to be kind of disgusted by the idea of hiring Kendall Briles, while recognizing that it's not going to cause you to stop rooting for your team and to support those kids, those young men, student athletes that are really not capable of protesting or influencing that decision whatsoever. It's interesting, but I also think it speaks to a greater concern, maybe beyond just reputational hit that Florida State most undoubtedly will take, and that is what's going on with Willie Taggart. What leads you to this? Because when Willie Taggart was hired, and I was in favor of that hire, so I want to make that known again, I was very, very vocal about I thought that was the right hire for a lot of reasons. And I'm surely hoping that it continues to be the case a year from now, 2 years from now, that I feel that way. Could be that I'm telling you all that I was wrong. Well, perhaps more importantly for Willie, the university could be saying that too. But here's the deal. I thought his recruiting prowess, he's young, his connections in the state would really give us an advantage in a recruiting war. And we all know it's about the Jimmies and Joes and not the X's and O's as much. You got to get the people. You got to get the kids in here who can play. And I thought he could do that. And his track record of doing that at various places that didn't have Florida State's name next to it suggested that he'd be ultra successful in doing just that at a place that does have Florida State's logo next to it. So he's a guy that's been able to recruit to a place like USF in Western Kentucky and was in the midst of doing something at Oregon that no other coach had ever done at Oregon in recruiting. So I thought, okay, that translates, that works. There were no accounts of Willie being a bad guy or anything like that. So it all added up to me that, all right, I like it. But what I'm concerned about is that they had this season, and for all of its problems, they were a point away from being bowl eligible. Now, it would have been an ugly 6-6 campaign, but nonetheless, it wasn't appreciably worse than the previous season. It just wasn't good. There was a lot to dislike, just like there was a lot to dislike the year before. What I don't like seeing, though, is this feeling that this reeks of desperation, that you lose your OC, you have a bad season because your offensive line is simply dreadful, and yes, there were some organizational problems, and all of a sudden you just decide, you know what, screw the Gulf Coast offense, my hands are off of it, whoever I bring in is going to take over and run the whole damn thing, and I'm done here. I'm going to go CEO coach this bad boy. Well, what happened? I mean, to me, when you watched that season, this last one, and it was ugly, they were a competent offensive line away from winning 7-8 games easy and having more success in this system. There were plenty. We pointed it out when we'd go back and watch these games and the highlights and things that you could get and what little you could with the all-22s. Plays were there to be made if you had a quarterback that understood how to run your system and an offensive line that was even competent. You could have had a successful, or certainly more successful, season with just those two things. And yet, we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here and saying no mas?
It's the way it does feel, like it graduated from something that was easily diagnosable. Fixable, I don't know how easy it is, but you could diagnose by looking at the film and saying, here's your number one problem. Biggest piece of the pie, offensive line. Here's your number two problem.
Right.
Quarterback is not built to run the system you're trying to run. Those are two really hard things to win with, considering that you wanted to stick with your principles. Now, they did try some different things in November especially. They tried some different wrinkles to make ends meet, so to speak. Didn't work out that way. But they gave it, the good old college try, and now you're just talking about roster flipping. All you got to do is flip a roster. But you're right. Lethal simplicity, Gulf Coast offense, these things are going completely away. I mean, that was one of the sticking points not only of the hire itself, but the hype leading into this season, this past year.
Now, he would say, I suppose, that that's the reason Kendall Briles is a candidate, because he's the one most capable of stepping in, since many of their concepts and offensive principles stem from what you learned by visiting Baylor and implementing a lot of what you saw in what Art Briles and Kendall Briles, in this case, were doing. So he makes the most sense to come in and pick up what you're trying to do and implement that and call that, I guess. Now, we're paying out the ass to do it if, in fact, those rumors are true about what that would cost. And I would think that you could save some money and find a guy equally as adept or certainly learned in that offense. Maybe he doesn't have the name along with it, but could come in for a much cheaper price, and you could use that money elsewhere. But you're trying to win, and I get, and I'm glad that money's not really an object when it comes to hiring your assistants. Florida State had a coaching staff this past year, Tom, that was the 10th highest paid coaching staff in the country. So they're, for people worried about money, Florida State's not skimping on expenses for coaches when it comes to trying to put together a winning football program, because the importance of having a winning football program is self-evident.
Yeah, I think it was in late September, early October when we were debating about what are we trying to get out of the season. That we had a great debate about, well, would you try something different with this group? Maybe that looks a little bit more like a hybrid of what Jimbo was calling and what we call, just to get by, because that's the personnel you have, versus building for the future. And just, we're running our offense. We've got to train the younger position players of how we want to do things. And you go from that place where that debate, in hindsight, is kind of fun compared to this one. And you look at this situation and say, are the kids starting over again? Like, would this spring camp be about new terminologies? I don't care if the base plays are similar, but are they changing, or are we having the language changed again? Like, what are these kids going to have to go through? And then how does that change the expectation curve? Sure, the season or the schedule for next season is a little bit easier. You just look at, taking a couple of big games off the schedule like a Notre Dame and your home and away splits. Okay, things do seem a little bit more favorable, but do we have to wait that much longer because these kids are going to have to get used to a different overriding philosophy, run versus pass, or terminologies? You could have a lot of the same reads, but what exactly are we changing from and changing to here? Is it drastic?
Yeah, I don't think it's drastic, but I can't get past the big picture stuff, the bigger question stuff about, associating ourselves with this guy who was, there's no way to say it, other way of saying it really, knee-deep in the midst of a heinous scandal. It's hard. I get the people who say, I'll support my school and I'm going to root for these kids because they have no say in the matter. And I like to see my football team win as much as anybody, but my enthusiasm for it is dampened with a hire like this. I get when people say that.
Well, mine is. I could say just from being away from work for a few days and looking at it almost as though, just a straight fan would look at it, is of all the people in the world to come here to Florida State, I mean, this is a destination job, right? These are the guys, even if Hugh Freeze, let's say half of your sources were right and he was never seriously considered. Well, the world doesn't believe that, and perception becomes reality that he was a true candidate here at Florida State.
Yeah, why do all your candidates have to be scumbags or
Right.
at least associated with scumbags?
Well, I think the important question here, and it's looking back at what Willie said when he got the staff done and filled out last season. He said it's not about hiring a coach just for the sake of hiring a coach. They got to be the right fit for what we want to do in terms of our culture and the process
and
here.
that's the question that will be asked immediately. You're right, Tom. The question will be, how is Kendall Briles the right fit for your culture in this university? And he's got to answer that. Somebody's going to have to answer that, and maybe he's got a good one. And again, is it possible to fully vet this to the place where you could find a good reason to hire Kendall Briles and say, I feel comfortable enough with what I know about that situation and what his role was in that, to hire him and stand before the dais there in the media and say, here's why we hired him, here's what we know, and this is why we feel good about it. Because if that's true, fine, do it. Fine, do it.
It is possible that he is a good fit for the culture.
Yeah, it is.
Like, it is. It doesn't seem that way.
Right.
But if you're the university in this circumstance, you would want to come out with guns blazing when you make this announcement.
Well, and my guess would be they'll do the opposite initially, in that they won't have a press conference for this.
That would be incredibly weak. Because it looks bad, man. I mean, right now, you're not going to help season ticket sales for the 2019 campaign. That ain't going to happen. That's
up for debate too, right? Because I got into this argument. I bring this up on some of the headlines, so it'll be redundant here. But I brought this up with Gene Williams, and He and I were just having this conversation, and listen, Knowles everywhere are having this conversation, so that here we were having that conversation, and I said, man, this all reeks of desperate, just extreme desperation to me. Again, I want to win games. I want to kick ass and take names, and I want to hire the right guy for the job. And if he ends up being the right guy for the job and you've fully vetted it and you feel good about the hire, okay, fine. Well, we'll all wait what that process was like and what you learned, and I'll judge then. But for now, it just, from afar, looks a little discombobulated. Seems to be a bit of a cluster. And I mentioned, why would you really have to have these names that are associated, tagged along with these scandals and problems when you could have, I don't know, you could hire a lesser-known offensive coordinator who knows the same stuff and could come in without the baggage. And he said that he thought that maybe they're really concerned about a lack of buzz and lack of season ticket sales. Well, look, this thing was going in the wrong direction for a number of years. You've been killed in September at the start of each of the last 3 years. The season started, you either suffered a major loss, a devastating blow that ruined any chance you had to make the college football playoff, or you had an injury. You had stuff that just really saw that this thing was derailed before it could get going early in the year. And so people were just, and then now this season happens. Virginia Tech, you get blown out, and we're off the tracks again. And people go, really? So 4 years in a row now, this is it? We're done here. And so you were already moving in the wrong direction in terms of, I guess, stirring more interest and ticket sales and buzz about your program. Got a slight reprieve because of Willie's hire and the offseason, the spring game and all that, but it immediately got derailed once you lost to Virginia Tech. And so this upcoming year, to me, was going to reveal slow season ticket sales regardless. The only thing that fixed that is winning, period.
Right. You get walk-ups.
Yeah.
You get a lot of walk-ups.
Got to win damn games, and lots of them. Don't fool around and lose to Boise State first game next year. Poof, peace. There'll be 17 people in the stands for the next game.
And to be fair and to revisit all of this, now that it's been a calendar year, Willie hit every correct note until we got to playing the football games in terms of crafting the message and getting people to buy in, both literally with the booster dollars and then figuratively with being just engaged in Florida State football again and woken up from the malaise that was the finish to last season. He did all of that. He helped heal the program. But now you're in a position where I thought there was legitimacy to the argument that if you got a better offensive line and a quarterback who knew how to run the system, you're back flirting with 10 wins in a couple of years.
I still think so.
It doesn't mean that he has to turn it over to a full-time offensive coordinator. You could have kept the same principles and had some continuity year to year.
I want him to. I like the willingness to do it. It just strikes me as interesting that we tout the simplicity that, hey, listen, we're going to come in here, we're going to run this Gulf Coast offense, we're going to run fast. It's a simple offense to learn, but you got to learn how to do the pace. We'll implement that, and you know what? The kids will learn it quickly because it's easy. And then we have a bad year, and all of a sudden he's like, somebody else take over. You guys handle that.
Right.
Okay, well, maybe he learned along the way, and it's okay to make adjustments when you learn something new. He learned along the way that this was a much deeper dive in order to fix the issues that were plaguing this program.
Yeah, but if I'm the guy, and I know it doesn't sound this way on the air, but trust me, when I argue with fellow Knowles, I'm the person who is much more moderate, saying, listen, you get an offensive line and a quarterback who knows how to run this thing. Well, I've screamed all year long
that the offensive line was so bad that it really is difficult to judge anything.
And I would think that coach believed that too, but this move helps suggest otherwise, that there's so much more to do.
Correct.
That if I'm the guy who would be at a bar sitting next to somebody else and saying, well, calm down a minute, we're an O-line and a quarterback away from flirting with 10 wins and then building this thing and be able to recruit off momentum. Mm-hmm. If I'm that person, I am now looking at the situation saying, well, Willie sees it differently because he's not going to have day-to-day oversight over what it is we do and install. He wants to leave that to somebody else, and then he's going to get a couple of, an update every couple of days or with what he sees in meetings. It's not the same thing where Walt was, all right, Walt, carry out my vision, and I'm going to work with you hand in hand here. That's how it all started last year. This upcoming season is going to be about something completely different.
No, I think he got in and
So what is Willie seeing that puts him in a position where he's like, I don't even want to deal with this day to day? And that is what makes me nervous if I'm that person.
Okay, but again, you can look at that two ways. You could say, well, that's not good. Misgauge the situation, did we? B, you could look at it and say, all right, a willingness to take a step back, self-evaluate, right? Self-scout, recognize that there are 25 things that need to be fixed. That speaks to the disorganization we saw last year, and they're all pressing And I don't have time to be worried about this offense and who's calling plays and me calling plays and putting that together during the week, because I've got all this other stuff that if I don't fix, my dream job is pulled out from under me with the quickness.
Well,
so I'm going to now bring in somebody I know can do this. Somebody I know, not a Walt Bell who I think and hope who I had to hire in a hurry, but rather a guy I know can do this. He will implement and run this smoothly. I've watched him do it. Hell, I took many of his same principles when I implemented the Gulf Coast offense at South Florida. So I'm going to go for this guy so I can concentrate on all this other stuff. Okay, I can live with that. I don't love it, but all right.
Plain and simple, if you were in the camp that said it's just an offensive line and a quarterback away, that's not true in the eyes of Willie Taggart.
Right.
Because his behavior, and that's a bad way of putting it, but his actions and the people we're considering and the way we're going about it indicates that he believes there's so much more to it than a bad offensive line and a quarterback who doesn't know the system.
Well, on game days, when you've got 10 men on the field and you have to call a timeout after having called a timeout, or you have repeated penalties that speak to a gross misorganization or disorganization, excuse me, then yes, I would suggest that was learned over the course of the season. That, yes, I thought it was this thing. Turns out it's more than that, and now I'm going to make the changes, which there's nothing wrong with. It's just that this isn't as simple as we thought it or as he thought it. And that's fine. I don't care if we come to that conclusion. Just fix the damn thing.
Well, agreed. Now, the fans can believe
at the end of the day, I don't care. Just fix it.
But the fans can circle around, the stadium and yell and with the torches and say, look at all these problems. But if the coach says, steady as she goes, don't worry about it, we're going to continue down this path, that's one thing. But in this case, his actions are saying, no, there's a lot of stuff here. You torchbearers out there, you may have a point here. I do need to shift some things around.
But I'm doing it, so put your torches away. I'm doing it. I'm fixing it. I'm tasked with fixing this mess that I found us in and didn't realize was as significant as it is, and I'm doing it. Now, the question then becomes, do you have to do it with this dude? I mean, you can't do it with somebody else. We got to bring in this guy, which is going to create more distraction.
Do we have to bring in old Dale Mabry or Kendall Briles here? Really?
Tens of thousands of customers choose Andro 400 every month because Andro 400 melts away stubborn belly fat and helps you easily lose excess pounds, increases your energy, your libido, muscle mass and strength, and improves your mood. Naturally and safely boost your testosterone with no side effects. Andro 400, it's affordable, 90-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. Call 888-510-9336 or go to andro400.com and use the coupon code JEFF. I'm so disappointed in that coupon code, I can't even begin to tell you. I love the old code more, but my protests fall on deaf ears. That's the coupon code JEFF for a discount on your order. andro400.com.
Just to see what I might spy. What should I say but Nancy whiskey? A playful twinkle in her eye.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban, said that he invested in Legal Service Paladin because it's an example of tying business success to societal benefits. The billionaire investor said that today's consumer wants to support companies with a greater purpose and that employees want to work for the same. Cuban told the Business Insider he's seen it through investments he's made on Shark Tank, as well as how a scandal shook his NBA team. Cuban says it's time we recognize having a social conscience is good business. The SEC says it has settled charges against boxer Floyd Mayweather and producer DJ Khaled for their failure to disclose payments they received for promoting initial coin offerings on their social media accounts. The federal securities laws contain an anti-touting provision which regulates paid promotions of securities offerings. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Indeed knows it's hard to find qualified candidates when you're hiring.
It's like finding a unicorn.
But when you post your job on Indeed, it's easy to find people with the skills you need.
Nurse practitioner, 4+ years experience, acute care certification.
Indeed has a huge pool of amazing candidates and screener tools that help you find your most qualified applicants.
Whoa, an entire short list of unicorns.
See why more than 3 million companies worldwide use Indeed to hire. Post your job at Indeed.com/hire. Indeed, the world's #1 job site. Source Comscore total visits.
Dell's dedicated small business advisors give you tech advice and one-on-one partnership to help your business grow. And now's the time to save on select business PCs with 8th Gen Intel Core processors until the end of the year. Maximize this year's budget and find the right tech solution for your business. Plus, get free shipping on everything. Visit Dell.com/business deals or call 877-BUY-DELL to talk to a Dell small business advisor today. That's 877-BUY-DELL.
Need help moving? Two Men and a Truck Tallahassee provides professional home and business move services, both locally and long distance. For your next move, visit twomen.com or call them at 850-224-2232. Two Men and a Truck, the movers who care.
We're completing our descent and will arrive in TLH shortly.
Oh, I'm so happy to be home.
Once we land, you can take off again with savings from the City of Tallahassee.
What do you mean?
The City of Tallahassee offers rebates for up to $300 in savings when you purchase energy-efficient appliances.
Wow, that would be a huge help.
The city also offers free energy audits.
What's an energy audit?
It's when an energy auditor comes to your home at the time that's convenient for you, examines your structure, and checks your energy and water systems. Then, they recommend changes that could save you energy, water, and money. The city also offers free ceiling insulation grants for qualifying customers.
Man, the city sure offers a lot of ways to save money. Once we land, I will check out all of the products and services the city has to offer. This makes me proud to call Tallahassee home.
Thank you for flying with us today. Don't forget that you can take off with savings with the City of Tallahassee. From rebates for Energy Star appliances to insulation grants, you can save energy, water, and money. Visit talgov.com for more information.
Hey sports fans, who's on your Mount Rushmore of baseball? I'm going with Ruth, Cobb, Aaron, and Mantle. Football, I've got Bradshaw, Peyton, Montana, and Brady. In basketball, Jabbar, Jordan, Bird, and LeBron. This debate could go on and on, but when it comes to the Mount Rushmore of personal injury law in Tallahassee, the choice is clear. Fonville, Lewis, Messer, McConaughey. Recently voted Tallahassee's best law firm, so avoid the underdog and go with the favorite. Fonville, Lewis, Messer, McConaughey.
Macy's one-day sale gets you ready for the holidays with over 25,000 deals of the day, in-store and online. Coats and sweaters, we've got them for him and her, 50 to 60% off. Dazzle her with a pair of True Miracle diamond earrings for just $289. Watches from Bulova, Citizen, and Seiko, 30% off. And freshen up the guest room with a reversible 3-piece comforter set. Lowest price of the season, $27.99. Tuesday and Wednesday at Macy's. Savings off sale prices. Exclusions apply. Macy's Star Rewards members can earn towards Star Money. Ask your store associate or visit Macys.com/Star Money for details.
Hi, I'm President John Thrasher. I'm here with some of our outstanding marching chiefs. They've been invited to an incredible opportunity, and they need your help. Next June, the marching chiefs will travel to France and represent both the state of Florida and the United States at the 75th anniversary of the D-Day invasion on the beaches of Normandy. As both an Army veteran and the president of the university dedicated to student veteran success, I know what a meaningful opportunity this is for these talented musicians. But experiences like this can be out of reach for many students. So today, I'm asking for your support so we can send as many of our marching chiefs as possible to this monumental event. Visit give.fsu.edu/Normandy. Thank you, and go Noles!
You're listening to The Jeff Cameron Show on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Jeff Cameron Show, 97.9 ESPN Radio. A lot of people weighing in on that, as I would imagine is the case, yes. I'm looking at response in our inbox here. Here's an example of what I've been receiving. This from Ryan. Jeff and Tom, first of all, love the show. I listen to it almost daily in Atlanta. I hopefully will get a chance to meet you guys as your blend of Knowles, sports knowledge, and humor hits all the right notes with me. Oh, well, thank you. I am disappointed to hear that Briles is one of the front runners for the OC position. I know you guys have talked to this on your show, though Freeze looked like the primary target until this morning. So this is from a few days ago when we got this. He goes on to say that he loves Florida State, and surely the administrators have considered what it does to the FSU brand. I want to be very clear. Love FSU football. I hope we win a lot over the coming years. However, I will always love the whole of the university more. I earned 2 degrees, met my wife and many of my best friends there on campus. I worked in athletics for the entirety of my studies. The football team represents the whole university, and while I will always want to win, at what cost? I love what Taggart has brought to the team off the field in many ways. I disagree with some of the on-the-field decisions this year, but I still very much believe he is the man for the job moving forward. Hiring Briles would be a decision I just cannot agree with and I cannot feel comfortable with. I know you guys aren't on the air today, so this was yesterday, to provide this feedback to you. Look forward to your shows next week, hopefully celebrating another candidate's rise to FSU's offensive coordinator. Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate the kind words to me and Tom and about the show and your concern. You represent, Ryan, the view or something similar to the view of a lot of people that have weighed in on this. I think that's true. I've seen the fan base at odds with one another arguing about this, and I think it's kind of that the school did everything they could to find out who this man is, what he knew, when he knew it, what he did about it. Was he involved in something nefarious, not just associated with, but involved in some way? That matters to me greatly. If you find that out, you cannot hire him. But if you find out information that makes you feel more comfortable and makes you feel capable of certainly sitting down across from reporters and answering very hard questions in a way that certainly provides insight into the process and reveals a thorough vetting, then okay. I'm not saying there's no avenue by which we couldn't hire him. I'm just saying I'd like to know that all of that was done. And more importantly, the university, my affinity for it or not, has got to protect itself. I mean, you are in the crosshairs. You're not FAU. Nobody gives a damn about FAU except for FAU people. That's it. Nationally, people don't even know FAU exists. Kendall Briles could have that job and nobody would care. It's FAU. To some degree, sorry, Houston people, you're insignificant too. At least compared to Florida State, compared to Ohio State, compared to Michigan, Alabama, and these schools with real cachet and national championships, 40-plus years straight of success prior to this one, you just don't matter in that bigger picture as to what kind of crosshairs you're in, right? The media cares deeply about what Florida State does and doesn't do. Hell, they talk about it incessantly, even when it's in the right. So you better be prepared to answer those questions.
You think they will? You have an inkling that they're just going to hire, send a release out, and move on, huh?
Well,
and cite that they got to get to work recruiting right away, something along those lines.
But they wouldn't be wrong. Early signing period complicates the situation. They wouldn't be wrong that they have to hit the ground running, and that if you're going to use him as a recruiting tool, you got to do it now. And what do you have, 8 days, 7 days? You got to go. So if he is the guy and they hire him, to some degree, they are truthful when they say, we don't have time for a press conference right now. Here's the release. We'll do it when we get done with recruiting. We got to get as many bodies in here as possible because they are involved in a roster flip period. And that has to happen. So
no, that's true, but we're not preparing for a bowl game after the signing period is closed. So we might have some time there in December.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. There's a time they're going to have to do it, without question. It may not be like within the next 5 days.
So would they wait till after February and signing day? I mean, that would be something, right? Or they wouldn't just do it at that point. He would be available for some comments before spring ball. I don't know. It's just if you're the university, you've got to know that these are the stakes here. And so I would think that if you're right thinking about this hire and you have enough to go on, even
I've been saying it all along, vet the process, protect yourself via a contract, whether it was the recent Photoshop of the Willie, I never saw the picture, but I know, and I'm not trying to say too sensitive to see. I just never saw it, and I didn't care to see it. I just knew it was a racist, disgusting thing. But he came out and did the right thing right off the bat, right? There have been a number of issues that he's been on the right side of here and represented the university in the right way.
National media perceptions and bullying from perhaps the Northeast.
Yeah, I've been very proud of the way that he's handled each and every one of these situations, and he's earned my trust in that way. And so, that's another thing that I find somewhat surprising here, that this would even be able to get to a place where in the eyes of many it's a foregone conclusion. Then again, in the eyes of many it was a foregone conclusion that Hugh Freeze was going to be the guy. So I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm not real certain. Do I think he's a candidate, Kendall Briles, that is? Yes. I'm not so sure Hugh Freeze was, but I do think Kendall Briles is. But I don't know when President Thrasher would get involved in something like this, when he wouldn't. I would feel much better.
One recruit is not going to, I don't think, change things fundamentally to where you have to get something done. But it is noteworthy, and I think it is at least a priority to get somebody in here by the time that we talk to Sam Howell this week. He's going to sign in 8 days. And he's going to choose between Florida State, North Carolina, who just got their offensive coordinator today, the guy out of Ole Miss. And NC State apparently is at least somewhat in the mix from a tertiary.
Sam Howell is not going to sign with North Carolina. Mac Brown's the head coach. That's not going to happen.
I get that,
so
but if we don't have any answers, it's us against ourselves. But that's the thing, and that's where I think pressure would come from. Again, you don't want to make the wrong hire to placate one 4-star quarterback.
No, especially if you got a grad transfer coming in.
But if this kid's camp is saying, we just want to know who the offensive coordinator is, as I knock a bottle of water over in my studio.
Yeah, no, he's got every right to know that.
Yeah. Well, and
but
if we don't have the answer in 8 days' time, I mean, damn,
we'll
guys.
have an answer in 8 days. Just may not have an answer in 24 hours, 48 hours. People want it yesterday, man. They're tired of this speculation. They're nervous. It's on their mind at all times now. Ever since Walt Bell left. I mean, I'm